Hello, good morning to our listeners in the US and good afternoon in the Netherlands. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar on lithium-ion batteries in circular economy. My name is Ruben Dubelaar. I represent Holland Circular Hotspot, and I'll be moderating this session. And let me start by mentioning that this webinar will be recorded. Any questions you may have for speakers, please use the Q&A box. This webinar will be organized and is organized by Holland Circular Hotspot in close collaboration with the Dutch Embassy in Washington, and of course, some of the organizations of our esteemed speakers. So today it's about exchanging knowledge and sharing best practices in the use and reuse of lithium-ion batteries. In our sustainability transition, batteries play, of course, a very important role. Electrification of consumer goods, but of course also in sustainable transportation and electrical vehicles. But that leaves us with some challenges because there's a growing demand for raw materials like lithium and cobalt, and urban mining or recapturing of valuable materials is or should be the new standard. So if we want to keep materials in the loop, we might need to rethink the production methods. So it becomes easier to retrieve or reuse materials. But we should also see how we can avoid use of specific materials or creating electronic waste. So today it's about exchanging knowledge between the US and the Netherlands. What kind of innovations are we working on? How can we learn from each other? And how can we help each other? Because what are the opportunities for international collaboration? And we're working with international supply chains, of course. And machines that are made in the Netherlands to produce the batteries in Germany will finally be used in the US. And what are the policies? In the European Union, the Netherlands, and several states in the US. And how can they help to speed up innovations or new technologies? So let me quickly guide you through the program. And what we'll do is we'll kick off with a few words of welcome by Lieske Streefkerk-Arts, Counselor for the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. And then we'll get a first presentation of Luc Spee, Policy Coordinator at the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. He will share with us some circular economy strategies for the lithium-ion batteries in the Netherlands and the EU. He'll be followed by Eric Fredrickson, Managing Director at Call to Recycle, who will tell us a bit about the US policies, but also some of the battery recycling trends in the US. Gao Liu, Senior Scientist and Group Leader at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, will follow with some of those local sciences in California. And we'll have some best practices from the Dutch side with Jasper Baltus, Managing Director at Iker Accu, and Benjamin Nietson, Owner Director of Stored Energy and Rent Battery. So after this presentation, we'll have time for some discussion and questions, and we'll have a very nice panel. And the panel will be led by my colleague, Emma Gervasi. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Lieske Streefkerk-Arts. Lieske, may I hand it over to you, please?
Sure. Thank you very much, Ruben. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today on batteries and battery recycling. I work at the Netherlands Embassy in Washington, D.C. as the Counselor for Transportation and Environment. And we have two big priorities. The one is working towards a circular economy, and the other one is promoting sustainable transportation. And the two companies or the two topics come together in batteries. So I'm very happy we're having this webinar today. We will be hearing from experts from the US and the Netherlands on the developments of batteries, and we will be getting some examples from companies. I think this is a first step towards, this is also a first step towards an innovative mission on batteries that we are planning later in the year. And I know that Ruben will tell more about that later on. So I'm very happy you could be here today, and let's quickly start with the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieske. Then I would like to hand over the floor to Luc Spee to do the first presentation. Luc, over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so my name is Luc Spee, and I'm a Policy Coordinator at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. And from that ministry, I coordinated the National Battery Strategy of the Netherlands. And today I will tell more one side about this battery strategy, but more specifically, I will go into the circularity aspects of batteries that will be well, very necessary. So actually the need for the strategy that we created in the Netherlands is the growth of batteries in society. So compared to a decade ago, we've seen rising numbers, of course, and the logical expectation is that they will even more steeply increase in the coming years. And that's basically driven by two transitions. The first one is an energy transition where we move from a fossil fueled energy system towards a more renewable energy system, and we need a lot of flexibility to keep the same stable energy system, and batteries can play a very important role in that. Secondly, we aim to have zero emission mobility, and with that also batteries come in as a logical way to have a clean way of transportation. And that not only encompasses personal electric vehicles, but also more heavy duty, because we see that batteries can do much more in the coming years. So the aim of the battery strategy is to ensure the increase in batteries so that the demanded quantities can be met. Also, that the usage in society is safe, responsible, and sustainable. And finally, to ensure that the economic opportunities that arise from it are utilized. So if we move on to the next slide, we've actually created 5 different pillars for the battery strategy that well have many more actions that are not on this list, but of course we need to focus a bit. So the first pillar actually is raw materials, and the aim of this pillar is to have sufficiently availability of critical materials, and also to promote sound mining. So to take a look at the social and environmental aspects of mining itself, which is in many cases a concern. The second pillar is circularity. So that one aims at sustainability and also increasing the access to critical materials. Also, urban mining was already mentioned, and it's an important aspect to make the most out of the limited number of resources that we have. The third pillar is safety. We have to ensure a safe use of batteries in society, and also we support the development of knowledge on the risk and safety of the batteries. The fourth one is the economic opportunities. Of course, we need a lot of innovation, and we aim to make sure that we innovate in the most needed aspects of batteries, to make sure that they become more safe, to have more capacity, and allow us to get to the final stages of the transition as well. And that also involves, at least in the Netherlands, to have a strong and healthy battery ecosystem. So we want to make sure that all the companies in the Netherlands cooperate well, and also with that, international cooperation is also very important, because we can't do it on our own. Finally, the energy system is an important pillar. As said, we are moving we are in the way of a transition in the energy system, and batteries can contribute to a stable and efficient energy system in that. So if we move on to the next slide, we have started a strategic and joint approach for the national government since 2020. So that year we started off, and we already noticed that in a lot of different ministries, we were working on the field of batteries, but in an isolated manner. And with the national strategy, we try to connect all of those. And in the meantime, we have we are cooperating with 8 out of the 12 ministries in the Netherlands, but we also involve a lot of other governmental agencies that are not even on this list. So actually my department is coordinating this battery strategy, and in that way we hope to create the most synergies on a national level, and also between not only the government, but also with businesses, universities, and other knowledge institutes. Still, the batteries is really a global field, and in this international context, the EU battery regulation is a very important piece of legislation. We have the EU started with a proposal for the battery regulation in December 2020, and after 2 years, we have had a political agreement on the contents of the document. And at this moment, that is all being processed, and hopefully that will lead mid 2023 into the adoption of the regulation. The interesting thing about this legislation is that it really covers the entire life cycle. So you can see on the picture one of the most encompassing figures that the European Commission created, but it really starts off with responsible sourcing in the mining stage, but it also covers the whole cycle through battery manufacturing, the use of the batteries itself, but also all the stages of refurbishing, second life, recycling, and finally a proper end-of-life phase in the end. So my expectations for this work are very high, and I've also listed a number of elements on the left that I think are very important. So I've already mentioned a couple of them from the picture, but for example, the battery passport will give a lot of information about what kind of materials are inside the battery, but also how they were sourced and where they were sourced. The battery regulation also includes efficiency targets for recycling on critical materials, but also, and that's of course a part of the efficiency collection targets for batteries. Too many batteries still are being put just in the general waste bin, so that's a shame, of course, and we really need to step up in increasing those collection targets. Safety is a very important aspect, but also the information provision, for example, the state of health of batteries. Think about the personal electric vehicle. After a couple of years, when it might be traded again, of course, the big question is how does the battery still work, and state of health can really provide useful insights in that. If we then move on to the circular batteries, this is actually a slightly different picture, although there are some similar there is some similar thinking on this as well. But this is the air ladder. So it really goes into ways of making the most of the materials. And I won't go through all the steps, but I would like to highlight 3 of them. The first one is refuse and rethink. So do we really need the batteries, or can we reduce the amount of batteries that we need? And well, of course, we do need a lot of batteries, but for example, car sharing might be, at least in the Netherlands, a very logical way to still allow everyone to their means of transportation, but with far less cars required than if everyone would own their individual car. Secondly, and that's also an important aspect, that is that we need to think about substitutes for critical materials. And there are a lot of different battery chemistries. And I think that what we would need to do is to search for different chemical components for batteries, also to enable us to avoid critical materials. Another aspect that I would like to highlight is refurbishment, and I think that that's actually a very interesting one. I think that, of course, it really helps to extend the battery life. But I also noticed that there is a certain dilemma in it with regards to recycling. If you extend the battery life, then of course it will be available for recycling in a later stage. And that's of course on the one hand good, but on the other hand, if you extend a battery that is already 15 years old, wouldn't it be possible to make more of the materials if you recycle it and then create new batteries with it with the up-to-date technology? So there is, I think, a certain dilemma, but perhaps Jasper can tell more about it, because I'm sure that he has very useful insights on that. And finally, the item that I would like to highlight is recycling. And I think that high quality recycling is very important. I think that most of the times what you would see in the world is that still pyrometallurgical recycling takes place. And for example, lithium is in almost all cases is simply burned in that way and cannot be recovered. So we really need high quality recycling to make sure that we keep the critical materials within the system. And I think that's, for example, hydrometallurgical recycling is better in that way. So, but I think that there are a lot of interesting topics, and I'm sure that also the panelists will go into more detail in that.
Thank you so much, Luc, indeed, and great to see the insights from the ministry point of view. And please stay with us for the panel discussion. Great to discuss this further. Let's move over to the other side of the pond, to the US. May I introduce Eric Fredrickson, Managing Director of Call to Recycle. Thanks for joining us, Eric. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ruben. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Fredrickson. I'm with Call to Recycle. Call to Recycle is a nonprofit working specifically on battery aggregation and collection. Next slide, please, Emma. So Call to Recycle has been around since the mid-90s. We were founded by industry to help address the emerging concerns with the batteries that were being put into the market at the time. We are primarily a rechargeable battery program, so we're comparable to what many in the EU and UK would call your battery directive compliance schemes, although we operate primarily as a voluntary activity voluntary program, because there are very few mandated producer responsibility laws and regulations in the United States. We do offer a variety of other battery collection and safety services, including helping manufacturers and others re-aggregate damaged and critically damaged batteries. As I said, we're primarily a voluntary program. And in the coming slides, I'm going to speak some on the history of producer responsibility in the United States over the last 30 odd years, and then where we see it going in the future as well. But our program is funded by the OEMs, despite the fact that in most places in the United States, there is not a specific obligation for them to do so. Call to Recycle manages over 16,000 free public-facing collection sites, and almost 90% of US residents live within 10 miles of a battery recycling drop-off point. What you can see on the right side of your screen is really the pathway of batteries consumer batteries in a circular economy in the United States. Call to Recycle does not own or operate any recycling facilities. We work through a vendor and partner network to collect the batteries at predominantly big box retailers and household hazardous waste drop-off locations, municipal recycling centers. The mixed batteries that come into our program then have to be sorted by chemistry, and then they're moved on forward to reclamation, where the battery metals can be recovered and turned into new products. Next slide, please. So talking some about producer responsibility in the United States. The EU-UK battery directive dates back to the early 90s. In the United States, the first producer responsibility that we had was in the state of Minnesota with a population roughly the size of Denmark, at a bit under 6 million, back in 1994. As you can see, from 1994 all the way to 2010, there were no other state level producer responsibility requirements for collecting and recycling batteries, or for OEMs to fund collecting and recycling batteries. So for that 15-year period, 16-year period, only 2% of the United States was covered by any type of battery producer responsibility legislation. The legislation in Minnesota is for rechargeable batteries only. And I do want to note that the numbers that I'm putting out here and the context in which I'm speaking is for consumer batteries and does not include wet lead acid batteries, starter batteries for automobiles. In 2010, the state of New York, with a population just over that of the Netherlands, introduced rechargeable battery responsibility. And so we went up at that point to a much higher percentage of the United States being covered by battery producer responsibility, but still well below 10% of the total population. There was no further activity until the state of Vermont in 2014 introduced a primary battery recycling legislation. Calder Cycle does operate an all battery program under our voluntary program in the state of Vermont. But when you look at the impact this had on total battery collections across the country, it's very small, with Vermont having a population roughly the size of Montenegro. In 2020, the United States saw its first ever all battery producer responsibility introduced in Washington, D.C., about the same size as Vermont, 600,000 to 700,000 residents in Washington, D.C. But what was significant about this is it was the first example of all chemistry producer responsibility for batteries in the United States. In 2022, the state of California passed all battery producer responsibility. And you can see in the green where the chart really jumps up, California has a population of about just under 40 million. So you're looking at a population comparable to Poland. So this will take the percentage of US residents that are covered by battery producer responsibility. It'll take it up significantly, but we're still only around 20% of the US population is covered by any type of battery producer responsibility. Washington State has a bill that has been introduced earlier this year, and it is highly believed that that bill will be passed this year, bringing the total percentage of residents in the United States covered by any type of battery producer responsibility up to about 22%. You can please proceed, Emma. So I want to talk about some trends that we see relating to consumer battery recycling in the United States. The first thing that's important to note is that the introduction of new state level extended producer responsibility is primarily not coming from either an environmental or a critical minerals standpoint. It is generally being driven by safety concerns. So that watershed bill in Washington, D.C. actually started off as a municipal composting bill. And in studying the contaminants that are found in other types of mixed recyclables and waste products, batteries were identified as one of the largest problematic waste streams in recycling. And so the district decided that in order to have an effective composting program, they actually needed to address batteries specifically. And so it wasn't even the desire to recycle batteries that led to the battery recycling legislation. It was the fact that batteries are such a problematic contaminant in the waste stream. Similarly, the California law that was passed was because of a number of very problematic and costly fires that have occurred in materials recovery and sorting facilities in the state of California. And as you can see from that article there, the legislature advanced battery EPR specifically aiming to avert facility fires. We see issues in the United States, as we do across the globe, with well-intended but misinformed consumers who think that the best thing they can do to recycle a battery is to put it in their curbside bin. It's then introduced into the mixed municipal recycling stream where it is handled by heavy equipment that damages the battery and starts a fire in the facility. Additionally, in New York City, much of the increased regulatory activity is occurring because of the safety issues that are being seen with micromobility device fires. Another important trend to note in battery recycling in the United States is carve-outs. Not all battery, because we have a patchwork of state level regulations and there is no significant effort to introduce any federal battery recycling producer responsibility, we see a lot of inconsistencies state to state in what is covered and not covered. So this increases the complexity of administering these programs because you have certain items that may be covered in one jurisdiction, but are not covered in another jurisdiction. As within many locations across the globe, there are carve-outs for medical devices. These carve-outs, though, typically do not just cover devices that may be contaminated by biohazard material. They extend much farther and include devices that would generally be covered under other type of e-waste and battery recycling legislation. We have seen a trend in producer responsibility in the United States to exclude larger batteries. Now, these batteries are arguably more problematic because when they do have fires, the fires that they cause are much more violent. Additionally, though, these batteries have far more material in them that can be recovered and reintroduced into the circular economy. Additionally, we are seeing carve-outs for lithium-ion battery embedded products. So a standalone battery might be covered by producer responsibility, but if that battery were in a product, it may not be covered. And additionally, it's important to note that EV batteries are typically not being covered under the same legislation as consumer producer responsibility, although we are seeing an increase in interest. New Jersey last year introduced a bill that is still under consideration, and California is discussing a bill for producer responsibility for electric vehicle batteries. It is important to note that currently EV manufacturers are generally not in favor of producer responsibility that involves a producer responsibility organization. And they're signaling that they want to maintain control and responsibility, not just for the recycling, but for the metals and materials that are available to be reclaimed in the recycling process. The other thing that's really shaping the battery recycling trend is the government requirements, incentives, and subsidies. So in the United States, we've had 3 substantial pieces of legislation passed recently: the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, sometimes called the IRA. We're already starting to see substantial rewards being issued, both in the way of grants, with over $74 million in grants awarded in December to 10 different recycling projects, but also in the way of loans, with $2.4 billion in loans being issued just last month to 2 different battery recyclers. If you look at the totality of these acts, there's over $135 billion available to U.S. organizations and organizations working within the U.S. that work on EV critical material sourcing, processing, and then battery manufacturing. Probably the single most impactful piece of policy as it relates to battery recycling, however, though, is a provision in the IRA that obligates manufacturers to use certain percentages of battery materials. So in order for consumers to be eligible for the $7,400 tax rebate for purchasing an electric vehicle, that vehicle will have to use 40% critical battery materials that are either domestically sourced or by U.S. free trade partners in 2024. That percentage goes up to 80% in 2026. We think that this will have a significant impact on the profitability of battery recyclers, because there will be a much higher demand in the EV batteries for secondary material than there will be for primary material sourced outside the covered area. And with that, I will turn it back over to Ruben.
Thanks so much, Eric, for all the insights from the US on policies. Great to see, and I think some great start for our next discussion. Let's move over to California. I would like to introduce Gao Liu, Senior Scientist and Group Leader at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Gao, over to you.
Thanks, Ruben. And next page, please. So my name is Gao Liu. I'm a Senior Scientist at Lawrence Berkeley Lab. So as you know, Lawrence Berkeley Lab is a research laboratory under Department of Energy, funded research facility. And in that lab, we're doing chemistry, physics, and biology research. And also a big part of the research is clean energy, and battery research is one of the major focus of the laboratory. So today I'm going to talk about some of the new recycling techniques that we developed at Lawrence Berkeley Lab and in my laboratory. So thanks, Eric, for setting the stage. So this slide shows that the urgency of recycling. If you look at the battery, the capacity growth in the past 10 years and also project to the future 20 years, the number of batteries that's going to be in service grows exponentially, right? And there are 3 points that I want to make here. So the first point is when we talk about recycling, right? We talk about recycling batteries made 5-10 years ago, right? Especially for EV batteries, for stationary storage batteries, the lifetime is about 10 years. So we're recycling things that made 10 years ago. If we make battery today, we're going to recycle them in maybe 2033, 2034. That's the timeline we're looking at. So as you can see, there's an exponential number of batteries we need to recycle in the future. So that's why the recycling is very, very urgent business that we need to really, be serious about. And the other thing that I think Eric mentioned is very important is there's a requirement that we need to use recycled material. In fact, if you look at the number of batteries we're going to make, the materials will be required in 2030 and 2040. There's not enough material that we can mine from the natural resources. So naturally, we're required to use recycled material in order to fulfill our requirement, in order to have that many batteries in service. So that's actually very, very important. And so there's a huge market for recycling. But if we only do the business we're doing today, as you can see, there's just not enough recycling we're doing. There's not enough material we can recover. So we need to have better process, and we need to increase number of collections in order to reach that number of the battery that we can recycle. So next slide, please. Luke mentioned we need to have better process in order to recycle materials. And so here is the best practice we have, right? On the right side is the parametallurgical process of recycled batteries. That's what we use for a long time, such as recycled lead acid batteries, right? First, we drive away all these the solvent organics, and then we put them in fire, and then we basically form the ingot, and then later on we process them, right? So that's a process. We're going to burn off a lot of organics, a lot of other things but however, those vapors need to recover. So not only we're using more energy in processing them, we also use more energy to recover things because we couldn't just release the toxic things in the air. And then the better way we do now is combining hydrometallurgic process with parametallurgic process. That's something you see on the right side, on the left side, where we shred batteries into pieces and then we put it into acid. So we digest them into different components. First, we form a black mass, and then we form them separate into different components. So it's a better process than burning off a lot of things, but it's still a process that needs a lot of chemicals and have huge environmental footprint in order to recycle them. But for that said, both process of recovering materials actually use less energy than mining. So recycling in both processes still make a whole lot more sense today. So next slide, please. So as we see, right, we are going to recycle way more batteries in the future. And can we think about making today's battery in a better way that in 10 years, we can recycle them, right? Rather than using very energy intensive and environmental impact ways, can we use batteries? So the process comes from designing materials from the very beginning. So what we do is on the left is we design the electrode binders in a way that is reversible. Either we can lock the binder so we can actually forming the electrode, or we can just by changing pH, we can disassemble the electrode. So in the middle is a schematic of that material, which we can make batteries, use them, and then just drop the water, and then they disassemble in different components, and we recover them. At the bottom is actually a battery that we made with that process. So we can make electrode, we can make batteries, recycle them, and in the end, we open up, we recover all the components. We recover aluminum as a foil, we recover copper as a foil, we recover all the active materials. So by processing those active materials, then we can reuse them. So we believe that that's a design for recycling is a better way for future batteries to be recovered. So the next page is just it's a short presentation. Thank you everybody for listening to this. And if you have questions, reach out to me and I'm happy to discuss both research and battery recycling with you. Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Great to see that. But please stay with us for the Q&A later on. Thank you so much. We move over now to the next presentation, and that's of Jasper Baltus of Eker Accu. Jasper, over to you.
So hi everyone. I'm Jasper from Eker Accu, and we are the creator of affordable energy storage. Next slide, please. So Eker Accu is actually part of a car dealership, which is called Urs & Barte. Probably only the people in Holland know the company and not from the USA. But the car dealership had a battery repair center for the brands Hyundai, Mitsubishi, and Nissan. And out of the repair center, we saw an opportunity for reusing EV battery packs. So it all started in 2017, where we decided to reuse all the brands out of electric vehicles in the whole of the Netherlands. Next slide, please. So any feedback, you can see it here on the picture. This one is from a Hyundai Kona. It's 64 kilowatt hours. And we have found the potential of this battery pack, which was actually rejected. And now you ask me, okay, what was rejected about the battery pack? It can be a really small thing. Think about a dent or a single cell with a defect or some software, a failing relay, can be anything. But the reason why this whole battery pack is rejected is because it's an insurance thing or a thing with the repairment itself, and it can be fixed. So they say, all right, we need to change the whole battery pack. Next slide, please. So if we look inside this battery pack, we see, of course, it's a lot of modules. It's 80% of the weight. And this is the part actually which we do reuse the most. The other components are the electronics. As you can see in the middle, it's 5%. Think about relays or fuses or some small electrical things. And 15% of the weight is metals or copper, as you can see on the picture, or sometimes plastics as well. Next slide, please. So the thing we do in Holland is that we have the recycling scheme, nearly the same as in the USA. And the battery pack doesn't go to recycling when it's rejected for the first life. So the first life is when it's in the car and it can be used in the car anymore. At that moment, the battery pack comes to us and we dismantle the battery pack and we take a close look at every part of it. We test each part by checking it on the voltages, the capacity, tense, how it looks, what's the state of health, how old is the car, and we match it and we create new products out of it. And I will tell later more about that. And when the end of life is really reached, then with a number on the cell, you can find it on our website. What is the chemistry of the battery cell? And then it goes to actually recycling. Next slide, please. So if you talk about volumes in 2017, it was like 1 battery pack per month. E-car Accu was in a car dealership. So the battery was dismantled between the cars. I also did some myself. But later it grew. In 2019, there was a big amount of battery packs available. I won't tell you why, of course. But that from that moment on, we had our own facility, and the growing curve is getting bigger and bigger. So as you can see, in 2022, last year, we have reused 250 kilos of battery packs. And I guess it will be each year more and more, of course. Next slide. So the products we can create with these battery packs are quite diverse. You can think about street lights, which are off-grid with solar panels on the sides and inside the battery pack. We go to gravers. At the back of the graver, the diesel engine is going out and the battery pack with an electrical motor is going in. You can also think about battery packs for companies. So they have a higher peak power. And we work with some charity companies which provides battery packs for churches and hospitals in Africa as well. Next slide, please. One of the products we make and we think it's a high potential for these battery packs is the e-car Power. It's a product of e-car Accu. And the battery packs out of electric vehicles are placed in, and when you rent this battery trailer for construction sites or festivals or the film industry, where they normally use a diesel engine, but because in Holland you can't use the diesel engine that you can. We want to go electric in Holland, so it's the use of battery packs is getting popular and popular. So we have created our own battery pack for rental. But more questions about it later, of course. Next slide, please. My learnings from the business we are into. I'm here from the beginning since 2017. And I've seen that repairment of the battery pack is actually better than reuse. So repairment, when the battery can be repaired and it goes back into the car. That's actually the best practice you can do. And in all the cases when that's not possible, I think reuse is the better thing to do. It's better than recycling, unless 100% of the weight of that battery pack can be recycled. And of course, I think then about that we can make better battery packs out of the waste materials. So I am actually a big fan of 100% recycling. So we don't need any more e-car Accus in the world. Recycling should also, of course, have zero impact on the environment. So it needs to be a clean form of recycling. But I see myself as a temporary solution, and that the end solution is 100% recycling and creating safe and sustainable battery packs. Thank you. This was my presentation.
Thank you so much, Jasper. Thanks, and also please stay with us for the Q&A session. Thank you, and I would like to hand over to Benjamin Nielsen, Owner Director of Stored Energy and Rent a Battery. Benjamin, over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Benjamin Nielsen. I'm one of the founders of Stored Energy back in 2016, and our sister company Rent a Battery. And one of our projects we do is a circular energy storage system based on used e-moped batteries. We actually call them scooters in the Netherlands, but I think in the US a scooter is a bit of a different vehicle. So these e-mopeds, they and especially the e-mopeds from shared mobility companies pop up since 2-3 years in all major cities in the Netherlands. Yeah, you can see them on the picture here, the green one from Felix and the white one from Czech. There's a couple of other companies as well, but we work together with Felix and Czech because they use the same new e-moped, which makes it easy for us to have only 2 streams of used battery packs. Yeah, next slide, please. So we have now built 2 prototypes for home storage systems. Yeah, it's over 500 used cells. We take the battery packs apart, test and analyze all the cells individually, make new battery packs and put a new BMS on it, put it in a housing, in the casing, and first one we tested for increased self-consumption of solar panel energy production, and the second one is now installed in at the Green Village at the Technical University of Delft, and we will test it for peak shaving. Next slide, please. So it's very important to focus on the whole chain. e-car Accus works with car batteries. We focus on these e-moped shared mobility companies. Like I said before, because it's these companies are really growing in the Netherlands, and they really focus on their own growth now, on the development of their applications. They're not really focused that much on recycling or reusing the battery packs. We often get asked, why not use e-bike batteries? But there are hundreds of different types of e-bikes and different types of bike batteries, which all, to take them apart, it takes different approaches. So with only Czech and Felix, we can really standardize. We also work together with a recycling company and a JKK engineering, a software company, to develop a as a service platform. Because if you build a circular product, you can't just build it and sell it, and because then you lose track of all the components. People can throw it away after use, and you have no idea where it's going. So you want to stay, you want to keep ownership, and so you need a platform to sell it as a service. Next slide, please. So now these e-moped shared mobility companies, after 4 years of using and these battery packs and 4 years of degradation, they have to get rid of these batteries, or they want to get rid of the batteries, because the changing these batteries, they need to do it 30% more often, which is a costly handling, a costly operation, and to get rid of it, they need to pay about 30 euros, 20 to 30 euros per battery pack. They have a negative value. So what we want to do is take these batteries off their hands for, well, less than these minus 30 euros. Make a new home storage battery out of it, which hopefully we can prolong the lifetime for another maybe 4 to 6 years, and that gives the recycling industry more time to develop cost-efficient ways of recycling these battery packs. Next slide, please. So of course we face a lot of challenges, technically, of course, legally, but I think most of all for now is financially, and I think that's a problem which the whole circular economy is facing. It is cheaper to import new battery cells from Asia than to reuse these batteries. It's very labor intensive to strip them, analyze, select, rebuild new battery packs. Another thing in the Netherlands, the market conditions for at least home storage batteries, there's not really a market as long as there's netting, soldering in Dutch. Yeah, we seem to be able to build these prototypes. They run well most of the time, but to make it into a consumer product and to scale up will really be a challenge, since yeah, as long as buying products from Asia is much cheaper than to reuse and build second life systems. Thank you very much.
Benjamin, thank you so much for your presentation. And before we dive into the Q&A part or the panel discussion, for our Dutch viewers, we would like to bring to the attention that the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, together with the embassy and colleagues of Dutch consulate in San Francisco and Los Angeles, will organize an innovation mission to California. So if after this webinar you're interested to join and to continue discussion in the US, please contact Roy Paulussen or one of us. But don't wait too long, because the deadline expires in a couple of days. So having said that, I would like to hand over to Emma to guide us through the panel discussion. Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Ruben, and thank you very much to all of our speakers. I see we already have some questions, so I will dive into them right away. So the first question is, what are the leading two scenarios that we should expect mid-2023, so this year, that will have impact on logistics and transportation for lithium-ion batteries? So I don't know who of you wants to take the floor first.
Yeah, Emma, I can speak on. I'll give one thing that I think is going to be particularly impactful, specifically in the transportation and logistics space, and I think that maritime regulations, in conjunction with the willingness of private vessel operators to move end-of-life or reconditioned batteries, is going to continue to present headwind for transatlantic movement of batteries for recycling. While there are ways that waste batteries could be moved, lithium-ion batteries can be moved via vessel, we are seeing and hearing significant hesitation to allow for batteries, including EV batteries that are sometimes misclassified as non-damaged when they've been in a wreck. We're seeing a lot of hesitance from vessel operators to accept cartage of batteries for recycling. What this is going to mean is that there's going to need to be significantly more infrastructure for first stage pre-processing. So either making an actual black mass or a crude battery shred at far more localized levels.
I see. Thank you so much, Eric, for sharing your views. Anyone else who wants to comment on this?
Yeah, I want to actually second what Eric was saying, that I think that's actually, I would say that's actually create an opportunity for the local, for example, United States or in the Netherlands, that actually recycle those batteries, because the transportation cost is so high. So it's actually create this opportunity for local industry and local economy to do recycling.
Yeah, great. Actually, yeah, we should see more opportunities rather than challenges in this case when it's possible. Thank you both. Okay, so we have another question. What is the certification process behind the repair of OEM scraped pack? I think this came during Jasper's presentation. I don't know, Jasper, if you want to comment on it first.
Yeah, I can. I think I can easily answer this question. It's what happens is that the dealership of Ursan Barte, so the owner of Igor Akku, is a dealership of Mitsubishi or also from Nissan and Hyundai, and both of the dealers of these brands, OEMs, they contact us and they ask us to be a repair shop, and then we say, okay, we have the knowledge to do so, but they provide us with the needs they want of the testing they want us to do by saying, okay, now it's safe to put the battery pack back under a car. So actually, it's not a specific certification. It's more like a more demand from the OEM itself.
Thank you,
Emma,
Jasper, for clarifying this.
I think it's an important question, though, and it's important policy consideration, because one of the things that we're hearing is concern and hesitation from the insurance underwriting community, because there is a lack of third-party auditable certifications and standards, both for recertifying batteries for extension of primary life in vehicles, but also for conversion into second life of stationary storage. One of the things we're hearing is, if I can't qualify the risk associated with those cells and the use of those cells, and how it's both technically and functionally prohibitive to really assess and understand the state of health and potential for things like cell degradation, the buildup of dendrites, cell separator damage, it's really hard to qualify all of those things for every cell. And because of that, we're hearing from underwriters that they're going to struggle to write insurance policies for stationary storage and reused vehicle and reconditioned batteries because they can't assess the risk. So I think it speaks to the need for additional certifications and policies that are specific to reuse and second life.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric and Jasper. Great, let's move on to the next question coming from Edvard from What Forever. Why is stored energy not in partnership with Ekar Akku? If you guys want to comment.
I think I can say that maybe the same reason as how the collaboration is between What Forever and Ekar Akku.
Benjamin, would you like to add?
Yeah, it's we are working with another technical partner, actually also a competitor of Jasper, but it could have been and it could be in the future. We are working independently of suppliers and technology, and I think it just, when we started this project a couple of years ago, yeah, we ran into some other people instead of Jasper, I think. Yeah, it could well be in future at some point.
We have worked together, but more for the rental part. So
yeah.
When the battery has rented a trailer from us some couple of times ago, but they see already the better business is in the bigger battery packs for rental. So now the vehicle there is more for the bigger packs. And I think this pilot project with these 18615 cells they use is actually from scooters, and Ekar Akku is more focusing on EV battery packs. Because we think that small battery packs are not profitable for reusing. And funny fact is that Benjamin actually also said that it's quite much labor by reusing these 18615 cells.
Yeah. Great to see that there are still collaborations. After all, that's why we're here and why circular economy is here also to help us through. Great. So now Klaus is asking, does Ekar Akku assume the guarantee for the second use of the battery modules? Very briefly, if possible.
Yeah, no, we do. It's that we test the battery pack, and we also test it on capacity. And when the cell is broken, we most of the time we have some stock to switch it for another kind of battery cell. And in that case, the end product can still be made. And that is the kind of guarantee we have.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to what is the critical mass for different circular battery activities? So talking about reuse, repair, etc. How does this relate to EPR at state level or in Europe at national level? Who wants to take this first?
So I can just to weigh in a little bit on this, because I feel that, you know, when you look into battery recycling, right, in fact, the material recycling is most acceptable way, both for industry and for policy. So if you reduce the battery into materials and you reuse them, everybody's happy with that, except, you know, you use a lot of energy to do it. Any other way of recycling, such as, you know, what Jasper was talking about, and you know, if we could recondition the battery, that's, you know, one step further, the used battery, that will have a lot more policy, you know, hurdles, a lot more safety hurdles, there are a lot more, you know, even business hurdles. So I think that's where the government really can work with industry to open up possibilities. You know, some places has to be allow this reconditioned battery to be used, right? We got to start from that, and then we can, you know, at least being tested for the safeties, for the possibility of lifetime, things like that. So that's my take on this.
Thank you, Gao. And indeed, talking about how the policy side can help the business side is definitely one of the topics of today. And we're going to ask actually Luke to comment on this in a moment. Let's take the last question now, as we are at time. So what would be your number one advice for battery manufacturers bringing new products on the market today in terms of design or circular business model? Great question, actually. I guess it leads to many answers, many wishes probably. Anyone wants to briefly comment? Yeah, Eric, you go first.
I think that the most important thing right now, and sometimes you'll hear people talking about, you know, design for recycling and other type of end-of-life considerations, and when in reality, design for primary use will always be the main consideration for a manufacturer. I need to make my product cost competitive. I need to make my product safe. I need to make a product that meets an unmet customer need and offers a value differentiation. What I would say, even with those as primary considerations, it's critically important for manufacturers of battery-powered devices to consider what end of life is going to look like at beginning of life. So if you're an auto OEM, or if you're a cell phone manufacturer, or if you manufacture a device anywhere in between, a snowblower, a snow machine, a scooter, a forklift, all of the variety of things that are being transitioning to electrification, how are you going to enable pathways for the users of your devices, the dealers of your devices, to get these critical materials off of the market? One of the things we too often see is manufacturers who already have a product in the field who then say, well, wait a minute, now I'm in a situation where I don't have a good recycling option. So it's critical to consider these things at beginning of life.
Very clear. So if there is no circular design, then we cannot have an actually circular battery. Thank you, Eric. Look, I see you wanted to comment as well.
Yes, I very much agree with it. And what I would like to add is that not only we have to take in the safety and circularity by design, but also we need information being provided. So I think that the battery passport will help a lot with that. So in that way, people who will be repairing or reusing or recycle the batteries can have a better insight what the best approach is for the batteries.
Yeah, thank you so much. Jasper, to you now.
Yeah. Now, I think I need to agree with Eric that the design for the battery pack is really important, and especially for the remanufacture or for the repair of the battery pack. So when one thing is broken, you can easily switch that part out for a better part in. So not the whole battery pack needs to go to recycling or to incarculating. It's better to design a battery pack so it can be repaired. Another thing what to do is that the battery pack should not be different from another model within the same OEM. So the battery pack from Hyundai Kona should be the same as from the Hyundai Ioniq. So you have one type of battery pack, and when one part is broken, you can take just a general part and just use it for that pack or for that pack. And what I see now is that these models are quite different. And that's quite a shame, of course, for the remanufacturing efficiency. Also, that the battery cell, they have quite low state of health during some years. And it would be perfect, of course, if we just break open the battery pack, remove the cells, put in new cells back, and that car can drive again for like 5, maybe 10 years. That is also quite good design. So we need to think about a better repair and making the life longer of the battery pack. In the beginning, if you have asked me 5, 6 years ago, I would have said make it better for reuse. But nowadays, I think that these amounts of battery packs, it can be reused. It's too much. So they can better design it for repairment.
Yeah. So probably also thanks to standardization. Very clear. Thank you. Gao and then Benjamin, please very brief in just one statement.
Yeah, one statement would be, I think if we have the, for the battery manufacturers, right, if they are also responsible for the recycling in the end, they will have better idea of, how they design the batteries, in the first place. So I'll take it out from there. So
thank you. Benjamin, how do you want to leave us?
It's more a government thing. The tax on labor in the Netherlands, at least, is very high, and the tax on using or mining or importing raw materials is hardly existent. And if you turn that around, then there's much more opportunity for repair and reuse and recycling and everything. Yeah.
Okay, so a request here. Thank you. Look, do you want to comment with one statement, again, very brief, just to close the conversation, to react especially to what Benjamin just raised?
Yes, I think, of course, well, I understand his wish. Of course, that's something that needs a lot of consideration as well when you start adjusting labor taxes. So, but I'm sure that it will be looked into.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all of our audience who shared questions with us, and especially to all of our speakers. I leave now the mic to Ruben.
Well, thank you so much, Emma. And with an eye on the time, I would like to finish off quite soon. So thank you all for joining us today. It brings us at the end of our session. I would like to thank the online audience, but of course, especially our speakers. For some of us, it was even early in the morning, guys. So thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning, and also for this very fruitful discussion. And I think it's just the start of a discussion. Like Lieske mentioned, and I mentioned that there will be an innovation mission going to the US. So hopefully we can reconnect on that and keep the discussion going. So thank you again to all. Also to those that have been involved in organizing this on the background that you haven't seen on screen. Lieske was there, of course, but also her colleague Lilian and Emma and Anka, who did technical moderation, and our other colleagues from Holland Circle Hotspot. So thank you so much for joining. Wish you all a great day, and hope to see you again very soon. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.